All right, so in part one, we discussed Bloodborne's base game, and now in part two, we're discussing its Old Hunters DLC.
Let's get it.
So, the DLC, which I feel really strongly that more so than the other games that From has had DLC for, it really feels like the DLC completes Bloodborne. It explores so many characters and themes and ideas that just weren't fully fleshed out in the game, and it almost feels like the game, in hindsight, is incomplete without it. You get to actually encounter Maria. Like with the fishing Hamlet, you kind of see this bad side of Maria and Gehrman and what they did. But then with the research hall, you kind of get this other side of Maria where, like, oh, she was maybe gentle and she did help people and maybe did have some qualities that are like the dolls. So the DLC is interesting. The DLC has, I would say, pretty much all the coolest weapons and fashion in the game. Like the DLC was just such an unlock in that department. You get so many cool weapons. And the DLC is cool because you get to essentially kind of go into like a version of the past. You're seeing these old hunters, these old like crude hunters who didn't use sophisticated weapons, right? They used these kind of gaudy explosive things and they dressed differently and they carried themselves differently. And you get to go to the fishing hamlet and actually explore that and see the corpse of Kos and battle the orphan. So it feels like it really ties the whole game together. But walk me kind of through your experience with the DLC.
Of course, I'm going to draw a lot of comparison to Dark Souls 3, as is my nature. Like when you get into the Hunter's Nightmare, but you get big like drag heap vibes.
Yep.
And I like how, throughout Bloodborne, they do these like kind of layers to these different areas. So this is very obviously, Cathedral Ward. It's a very close, basically one to one just in this drag heap other time, which is cool. I at the same time would have loved to have had, obviously we have the research hall, we have the fishing hamlet, two brand new, really cool areas. I almost wish the Hunter's Nightmare was like another section of Yharnam.
Right.
It could be similarly styled where it's very evidently like, oh, we're still in Yharnam, but just a completely different area. And they do, there are totally new paths for sure, that you kind of go down, and the area feels completely different. Like aesthetically, it's way brighter. It's almost got like kind of like desert, oasis vibes in certain areas
Hmm.
where there's like, the big like pond style areas. So it definitely feels different. I just wish it would have been totally different.
I get you. I
Totally.
even remember having that thought when I first fired it up. I was like, oh, this is Cathedral Ward. Okay, hopefully it's really different. Like I
Yeah.
just had no idea where they were going with it. And I think ultimately it ends up being, it's a really well
Y-
designed area and
Yeah.
they do it justice, and like the River of Blood and just all the enemy variety and all the cool gear you can obtain. The old hunter's gear is just the sickest in
Yeah,
my
it's so
opinion.
cool. And
It is so good.
the beast cutter weapon is just so gnarly. It's just, I wish I would have gotten it early and like actually played through. Like I'm almost considering New Game Plus Cycle, just like beast cutter, just go to town. It's just such a
Oh
cool
yeah.
looking weapon. Obviously, Holy Moonlight sword. You got the bow blade was super cool.
Yeah, Simon. Simon's really cool, and I feel like Simon
Hmm.
Simon is the kind of NPC who was kind of missing in the base game.
Yes. Hmm.
He's a little bit of a guide. He talks you through a lot of stuff. He's reliable. He's trustworthy. Like, yeah, Simon's really cool.
He
Um,
follows you kind of throughout the DLC,
yeah,
similarly to how like Patches does as Lap in the Eldering
yeah.
City.
And I know you really enjoyed Ludwig, and we were texting about it when you were fighting him. It actually sounds like you did way better against him than you were expecting, right?
Yeah, well, I basically it was again, this was probably my most memorable moment through my entire playthrough of Bloodborne was stumbling into Ludwig's boss room completely unprepared. I was just wandering around exploring, the Hunter's Nightmare for the first time. I was probably at half, blood vials. I was probably low on bullets as well. Went in there. Oh man, here's the Ludwig fight. But let's give it my all. And sure enough, I was able to beat him first try,
Damn.
um, which felt so good. It was like the most like euphoric, unforgettable feeling of beating a boss for first try and just by chance stumbling into the boss room, completely mentally unprepared. Like for me, I go through certain modes through these games where you're in exploration mode, learning the area, etc., and then you've got boss boss fighting mode where you're like, okay, make my run to the boss room and we're gonna learn this fight.
Yeah.
And so this is that weird in between where you like stumble into a boss room, and there are certain instances where you feel confident, you feel well prepared. You're like, okay, this is the new boss. We're gonna take it on. We're gonna see how it goes. But then this is that other case where it's like, oh, I just spent the last like 2 hours messing around in in the Hunter's Nightmare. Like I'm not ready for Ludwig right now by any means, but I was able to kind of rein in my like anxieties and like the pressure of feeling like I was going to get decimated. But the further I got into the fight, the more that pressure, like, kept building. It was like, oh, I might be able to actually do this. It was just such a special moment. And it's such a good fight, too.
Ludwig's reputation precedes him. Like right, it's kind of like Gale or Sword Sane, or like there's a handful of those bosses where like whether you fought them or not, if you're even like vaguely aware of these games, you might know about them. You might have like heard the music or seen an image or seen a video clip or something. And yeah, I mean Ludwig is a fan favorite, and I'm sure when you got to the fight and you saw like, okay, he's got the holy moonlight sword,
Yeah.
the music, just From's artist going crazy with his design. Like it's just put Bloodborne into one boss silhouette, and it's like, boom, here you go. It's awesome. That's so cool you first tried him too, because I feel like that can go two ways, right? Sometimes you get caught off guard by a boss and you're really just caught off guard and you're
Mhm.
unprepared and you get wrecked. And then other times you're just not overthinking it. Like you're kind of in a flow state and you're just
Yep.
going with it and you're not anxious. And maybe that's what happened. Like you just kind of locked in and you
Mhm.
just fought him and you pulled it off. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think part of it is you for me, I realized Ludwig has this Ludwig was like one of the bosses I was looking forward to fighting the most, and just stumbling into his boss room. And yeah, you enter this flow state where you're like, I almost accepted. I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna win this first fight. So I'm just gonna start learning his move set and just kind of like take it all in. This is my first experience with this boss that I've been wanting to fight for so long. Let's just kind of take it in and see what happens. And it was just this kind of like organic culmination of my experience with the game, and it all came together in that moment, and yeah, it was special.
No, that's awesome, man. I'm glad it was such a good experience, and it seems like it lived up to the hype for you, or maybe even exceeded it. And that holy moonlight sword is just it's one of the best variations of that weapon. So much fun. I love
Mm.
playing through with that. It's really fun to do an arcane build. Sometimes I'll swap between because I have like a max new game plus character, pretty much maxed attributes, and I'll just swap back and forth when I want to go arcane with the Holy Moonlight Sword and the Cause Parasite. And that's just a really fun way to play through Bloodborne. But yeah,
Yeah.
so what about before we go up to the research hall and like the final
Mm.
bosses and the fishing hamlet? It sounds like you were a little less stoked on Laurence when you fought him.
That is a vast understatement.
Okay.
Laurence is by far my least favorite boss in Bloodborne. Um, I just cannot, I just can't wrap my head around his HP bar like at all. I
Okay.
just can't do it mentally.
So in the
Um,
seven stages of grief, you're in like the denial, maybe the
I'm in the
bargaining stage.
complete denial and trying
Okay.
to, yeah, that I even ever fought Laurence. I'm just trying to like black that out from my memory.
Well, he's that optional boss, right? He's the sort of nameless king
Mhm.
of Bloodborne. Like he's off to the side, and again,
Yeah.
it's interesting because it does kind of feel like in the base game he was made Lawrence was maybe supposed to be the bloodletting beast because they
Mm.
have like the same injury to their skulls, and it just sort of seemed like, oh, maybe this is the Lawrence down on the chalices. But then whether that's true or not, I mean, if it is true, it seems like they retconned it. And then in the
Mhm.
DLC, you actually just fight him in the church, and yeah, he's the toughest cleric beast. I mean, the
Yep.
fire and the AoE stuff. Yeah, I don't have to tell you, it can definitely be tough. There is a pretty tried and true strat for getting Lawrence, but yeah, he's for
Yeah,
real.
I
He's for real.
it's mostly just I don't know. He's very
He's a
obviously he's
frustrating boss. I think when you first start fighting him, it is like, what the hell? Like, what is this? This is stupid.
and it's I mean, he's obviously way more complex than the regular cleric beast fight. And it is quite amusing that the last, or for me, like the most frustrating boss to fight was just like a reskin of like the very
Right,
first
right.
like intro boss that you fight. Yeah, there's not much more to say. I do like his like second phase or whatever, where he like you like break off his legs or you like cut his legs off or whatever, and he becomes this like pool of lava dude. Those attacks are really cool. I do like all of his fire attacks, and his movements are pretty chaotic. It's an interesting fight to be back in that that same arena where you fight Vicar Amelia. But yeah, I don't know. Honestly, 75% of his health pool, and I might have enjoyed that fight. It was just it was just always like a little bit like this fight's just going on a little bit too long for my
Yeah.
liking.
Well,
I don't
and
know.
they take away that ability to just hug him or get under him, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yep. You
and
definitely have
there
to be.
are those little safe zones where you can sort of pseudo hug him, but it takes practice, it takes time, and I love like how important Laurence is of the story. I really
Mhm.
love the music. But I'm totally with you. Like it is a bit of a reskin. The arena's familiar. It's not the most exciting moment in the
Yeah.
DLC. I would say he's actually pretty overshadowed by what comes with like the research hall and
Mhm.
the fishing hamlet and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the double whammy of boss room we've already been in,
Right, right.
boss we've already fired fought. We'll just light him on fire and crank his HP up beyond all belief. It was just
Well,
not
right, and like at
not the
least
equation for me.
well,
Not
right,
it.
and at least 50% of everything going on in Bloodborne, if not more, is like basically Lawrence's fault anyway. So he's a terrible person. So yeah,
So
no,
it's suiting. It makes sense. It makes
yeah,
sense ultimately.
no pressure, no love needed for the first vicar. But yeah, so going up the research hall, it's a cool level. It's kind of like a little puzzle box. It actually kind of makes me think of like something from a Resident Evil game, with the spiral stairwell and
Mhm.
all the little rooms and keys and things like that. Did you do the Adeline quest and get the
No,
milkweed rune?
I didn't.
Okay,
Obviously, you when you first enter the research hall, there's the little room where Adeline's in there, and I really wanted to because she's one of the more like kind of compelling random NPC interactions that you have in the game. And for whatever reason, it was probably honestly probably because I was just so focused on trying to get to Maria. There's just
right.
such a big hype. There's so much hype around the Maria fight. Like every time anyone ever mentions Bloodborne, everyone immediately thinks of the
Yeah.
Maria fight. So
Well,
I
she
just
was on
not.
the art, right? She's on the cover art for Old Hunters, and
Yeah.
yeah, she was kind of really hyped up. So,
Um.
no, that makes total sense. I would say like the best reason to beat Lawrence is that you get the Beast's Embrace rune, so you can transform into a beast.
Mhm.
And the best reason to do the Adeline quest in the research hall, like you said, she's actually a pretty interesting character. That's a pretty
Mhm.
cool level. But you get the Lumenwood rune, which allows you to turn into kin. So you look like you have a cauliflower head. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Some people call it broccoli head. It looks more
Mhm.
like cauliflower to me, but I think that's one of the single coolest things From has ever done. Is
Mhm.
in the Bloodborne DLC, they give you the option to turn into a beast or a kin. Like
Yeah,
that's
that is really
really cool.
is super
Um,
cool.
yeah, and it actually physically transforms your character. So that's yeah, that really rolls. But I would say on New Game Plus, yeah, definitely do that because I think you'd have a lot of fun playing around in beast mode or Squid Boy mode. Yeah, the research hall is cool because you're actually seeing this other side of the healing church, this experimental, scientific, maybe pseudo-scientific side, where they basically have this secret laboratory and they're doing all kinds of experiments. And I don't have much else to say about it other than it's really interesting that they were like pumping people's heads full of water because they thought that could help them get in tune with like the cosmos and some kind of higher plane. Again, no profound takeaway there. It's just
Mhm.
interesting. And then
Yeah,
you find the bloat-headed people throughout the research hall. So,
I just remember this feeling just super like sinister and scary going through it, and just like all these like these patients that are clearly suffering and being experimented on. But you made it sound like Lady Maria was actually like the intentions were good behind the research hall.
yeah, I mean, if you talk to some of the NPCs in the research hall, they speak favorably of Maria. She
Right.
was around, and it was almost like when she was around, she was like this gentle, calming presence. Yet,
Mm-hmm.
she was doing some pretty heinous stuff in the fishing hamlet. So I think Maria is presented as this character there's like a dichotomy or like a duality there.
Mhm.
And make no mistake, up in her clock tower, she's essentially guarding the secret of this nightmare. And I don't feel that she's some pure righteous actor in the grand scheme of things, but I do find it interesting that she kind of looks after and tends to these patients in the research hall. And you can read that as her paying off some kind of debt, mandated or not. Again, that's just my personal read on the game. But that's not completely dissimilar from how Gehrman and the doll watch over the hunters in the dream. Meanwhile, Maria doing that in the nightmare. And like Gehrman, when it comes down to it, if you push your luck, she'll try to take your head. But yeah, we'll get to her in a minute. But of course, before you get to Maria, you fight living failures, which I think the read there is that these are probably failed attempts of the healing church to create some kind of some kind of like celestial emissary. The fight, I think, is actually pretty fun. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty unique. I love the music. I think the arena is pretty cool. The big lumen flower. Did you enjoy this fight?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier this feels like kind of an upgraded celestial emissary
Yeah.
fight, and that you're fighting these like alien like beings, multiple of them, kind of around this arena. But I think this is a bit more engaging and obviously poses a little bit more of a challenge than the emissary fight. And I like you obviously right in the middle. There's the big tree right at the center of the stage that you can kind of use to break aggro, and eventually they summon down like a big attack from the sky. It's like these kind of meteor attack, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed this fight. It was at least fun.
Yeah, yeah. The music makes me think of like John Williams Star Wars music when it really gets going. Yeah, and I love all the visual effects as they conjure up their Cosmos laser bombs that they shoot at you. But then we have Maria, obviously.
Mhm.
Much made of Maria. Lot of hype. It's interesting because I think like all we really know is that Maria like vanished at some
Mm.
point. Like we know she was associated with Bergenworth, Gehrman, but then it seems like she probably killed herself. She threw her Mercutio, her weapon, like down the well, which I don't know if you went after that weapon in the DLC. It's a little tricky to get. But there's
No, I
like a
didn't.
line of there's a line of flavor text about like she couldn't like stomach what she had done or something.
Mm,
So I think the implication is she likely committed suicide. And
mm,
then, I don't interpret things literally in the Hunter's Nightmare. Like I don't think this is literally Maria just sitting around waiting for you. I feel like it's sort of it's like an avatar of Maria or a ghost of Maria, or, something. Like it's a representation of Maria in the nightmare. That's at least how I read it. But yeah, talk to me about Maria. Talk to me about this fight. It sounds like when we were texting, it wasn't too tough for you.
I think it only took me like a couple attempts. I think she kind of falters in the like kind of where Gascoigne and Gehrman excel in these kind of humanoid fights. Maria honestly kind of falls flat a little bit in the regard that she's just so easily parried, unfortunately, that
Yeah.
it really, and it's really unfortunate because she has a really cool move set from what I've seen of it. Like I almost wish I would have stopped parrying or like refrained from doing so just to kind of experience that fight a little bit more. But you're at the same time throughout the entirety of Bloodborne up until this point, you're kind of taught to rely on the arsenal that's been given to you, and a big part of that has been the parry function from your firearm. And honestly, if you use your firearm in this fight, you're going to win this fight. But I think her design's super cool. The Astral Clock Tower itself is an incredible boss room. Obviously, a lot of people like to draw comparison to Sister Fried,
Sister Freed's
scale.
way cooler.
Yeah, no, I 100%. 100%.
Hashtag controversy.
Hashtag,
Hashtag hot take.
hot take. But that's the thing is Sister Fried, there's an actual fight to be had there.
Oh yeah, 3 phases, high
Three phases,
difficulty.
high difficulty. There's a lot going on in each of those
Now, I
phases.
will
And
say, you can exploit Freed with a backstab. Like you
Mhm.
you can get her
Oh yeah.
repeatedly with backstabs and stuff. But I think she's quite a bit more dynamic. And I also think that's because she benefited from coming after the Maria AI, right? And
Yeah,
I'm with you. Like
100%.
Maria's cool, super central to the story of Bloodborne.
Mhm.
When you're doing a glitchless all bosses speed run, this is a breather moment. Like I'm more nervous at Living Failures, and I'm way more nervous at Orphan of Kos.
Right.
This feels, and I'm sure you could even draw that comparison in your
Yeah,
playthrough.
I mean it's super
More things can
telling.
go wrong during Living Failures, in my opinion, than Maria.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. And it's super telling, as me, a person this is my first playthrough of this game, and it took me all of 2 tries to
right.
take down Lady Maria without really having to think about it. Like I didn't even really have to strategize all that much. I just, through my experience with, human-esque fights throughout this game, you are naturally drawn to, oh, well, I can parry this attack. Oh, I can parry this attack. Oh, oh, it turns out I can just parry all of Maria's attacks. And didn't take me that long to learn the timing, which is unfortunate because I
Yeah,
think
the timing
there's.
feels really generous with Maria
Mhm.
on the firearm parries. And I think what's odd about it is that Gascoigne, like when I was playing Bloodborne like really seriously, I was always more on guard against both Gascoigne and Gehrman. And you would
Mhm.
actually think it would be against Maria, but it's not. Like
Mhm.
Gascoigne makes me more nervous and Gehrman makes me more nervous. It feels like there's more room for error. Yeah, I not a terrible fight, but
Mhm.
it's like almost a half miss in my opinion. It's just not my favorite moment. Love the cutscene, where she wakes up and kind of
Yeah.
scolds you. Yeah, the arena with the clock behind you, the astral clock. It's so cool, but
Yeah, like there's
um,
enough. She's got enough like swagger to to like
she
elevate
does
her. Like the experience of this fight is cool. Like it's all
very
around.
cool.
It's a really good vibe. It's just let down by the actual fight itself, unfortunately. But
Hmm.
yeah, I really appreciate Maria's design in general, and there's just a slight lack in execution on. And I think it might just be because she's so melee aggro heavy, at least from like my couple of fights with her.
Yeah,
Whereas Gehrman and Gascoigne, they kind of split between their firearm and their melee weapon, which kind of splits your mentality towards how you're gonna parry, how you're gonna react. Whereas with Maria, it was just like, oh well, she's gonna come in with her sword again, and we'll just kind of parry this until we're done.
yeah. I think
Um,
even like we were talking about Logarius earlier. I think Logarius keeps your brain a little busier, when you're
mhm,
fighting him versus Maria. Yeah, she's not. She's in it's probably like a tough bill, also like a tough
mhm.
ask, because her presence looms large over the whole game in the DLC, and every time you interact with the doll, you understand you're interacting with this character who was likened after or this it was inspired by Maria. So it always kind of feels like Maria's looming large over the games. Then when you actually fight her, it's like meh, whatever. I've even heard speculation that like perhaps one of the tombstones in the Hunter's Dream is supposed to be Maria's.
Hmm. Interesting.
Either the one that became the tombstone for the Hunter's Nightmare DLC, or the one across from that, the one under the tree. That's like a lot of speculation. But anyway,
It's a cool theory though.
yeah, you defeat Maria, you drop through the clock, and again, I think kind of a reminder. It's like obviously the fishing Hamlet is not literally up in the sky through the clock. I think
Right.
that's what's really cool though,
Hmm.
is that you would never expect when you walk through the clock to end up in the fishing Hamlet. I mean, I think the
Right.
fishing Hamlet is literally some adjacent little town from Yharnam.
Hmm.
But I had actually long speculated, and who knows, they might still do this, that we would have a clock tower to fishing hamlet moment with the Erd tree in Elden Ring. That we would like
Mm,
get up above the Erd tree and something like this would happen. It still may,
it's
right?
still, yeah, I mean,
Because
hey,
they're not
Shadow of
putting
the
out
Earth Tree
DLC, they're
coming
they're
up.
putting out an expansion. So I'm buckling
Right.
up for like basically Elden Ring 1.5. I'm almost buckling
Oh
up for like
yeah,
a Scholar of the First Sin situation.
as
So
am I, and we can that's
yeah,
another
got to put a lid on
podcast.
it. Got to put a lid on it. It's late.
We can go
But
on for another 6 hours about
that's
Shadow of the
another
Earth Tree
podcast. That's
speculation.
another podcast. But with Maria, last thing on Maria, and then full on fishing Hamlet and Endgame,
Hmm.
you don't get a fight like Melania without Lady Maria. Like you can
Yeah,
feel the
absolutely.
DNA. You don't get freed. without Maria. So I think Maria is like a really important boss
Super
because she's
important.
important to Bloodborne and she influenced a lot of later bosses. So I
Got to
think
give credit where credit is due.
totally. So Fishing Hamlet, I'd say next to Central Yharnam, it's my favorite area in the game. I think it's one of the most artistically inspired areas that From
Hmm.
has ever designed. And I think the actual pathway design, like the actual level design, the ladders and the walkways and the more open areas, I think they're really well done. And I
Hmm.
think even as challenging as it can be and as ganky as it can be, like it's Bloodborne's last gasp, right? It's the final area of the DLC. So it should, like the Ring City, it should be hard. I'm obsessed with the Fishing Hamlet. Tell me what your experience was like with it.
Yeah, I also absolutely loved it. The little fishmen enemies that are throughout are just they're hilarious, but also just like a really flavorful design. Like I think they're super well designed enemies for the area. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You also got the huge shark
Oh
men
yeah.
enemies too that are just completely terrifying,
The
utterly
two sharks down
terrifying.
the well might be the
Oh my
hardest part of
gosh,
the
yes.
DLC, honestly.
Yes, that
Yeah.
was a wild experience.
I do love
Um,
when From does stuff like that though, right? Because you don't have to go down the well. Like it's completely optional. You don't
yeah.
have to deal with it, but it's just one of those trolly, puzzly combat
Yep.
situations that it's like you can't, it's like a moth to flame. Like you have to go down the well and fight the sharks. You
Yep.
can't stop yourself.
And there are those moments. Obviously we've got the whole undercity of the capital in Elden Ring, the whole
Right.
kind of sewer areas down there. Got a lot of those big beastie enemies that you could just totally avoid. But let's just take on five of them all at once. Why not?
Well, and I also
um,
like in the Fishing Hamlet, you kind of have like maybe the game's only proper NPC invasion, which is Brador coming
oh
at you
yeah.
with the
Hmm.
Bloodletter, and obviously one of the coolest sets in the game too, with the antlers. You assume to be beast antlers, right? And like he's got
Hmm.
beast hide on him that he's almost wearing like a trophy. Yeah, Brador is a really, you could do like a whole discussion just about Brador, but Bloodletter, I would highly recommend at some point experimenting with a little blood tinge and a Bloodletter run. It is
Hmm.
such a fun weapon.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, Brador is just such a cool character and kind of enigmatic. Just from like the little bit that I've experienced dealing with him, because obviously he's down in the that jail cell,
Yep, in the
um,
hall.
in the hall,
Yep.
in
Yeah,
that
he has a
little
pretty cool quest
stretch.
that's definitely worth doing. But
Hmm.
yeah, like did you really like vibe with the art direction too in the Fishing Hamlet, just the color palette and how wet everything
Yeah,
is?
yeah. It's just it felt like an abysmal like Victorian fishing town. Like it was perfect. It was spot on. Obviously the easiest point of comparison for other From games I think is Mibu Village. It's literally another fishing hamlet, but it's got that similar dark vibe that you kind of want to. At least with Mibu Village, you want to try to like kind of stealth around it, so it slows you down. And so my experience with the fishing hamlet was similar in that you take your time going from like little section to little section and like kind of scoping out where the enemies are at.
And you're rewarded for your exploration too in the
Hmm.
Hamlet, which I appreciate. Like it's a really tough area with a lot of strong enemies, but you know, like that tunnel with the winter lanterns, like
Oh yeah.
it's worth the exploration.
Oh
It's
yeah.
worth the combat puzzle. Yeah.
Yep. You get an extra the like final Titanite shard.
Blood
What
Rock.
was it?
Yeah.
Blood Rock. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of that where yeah, if you spend the extra time, jump across the rooftops to get into that like secret little entrance into that back area, the caves and all that. Yeah, I really love the design and love just kind of like navigating my way through it. And then you kind of have to too in order to get to the Orphan of Kos boss fight because you kind of need to navigate down to that cavernous area.
Right.
Obviously, there's the lift that is the shortcut back up to the lighthouse lantern. But yeah, had a really good time making my way through the fishing hamlet.
Well, and I enjoy Simon's quest, like we were
Mm,
talking about throughout the DLC. Simon meets his end in the fishing hamlet,
yep.
but his set is so cool. I love rocking Simon's set. Like
And
like you said, the bow blade I think is
the
one
bow
of the more
blade.
underrated weapons in Bloodborne because it's not immediately obvious how you use it in combat. You know, it's not just the holy moonlight sword or something, but I'm sure you could imagine like how unique it would be to play through all of Bloodborne with just a weapon like the bow blade.
Yeah, super unique run for sure. And his design is just it's just sick.
Yeah. It's so cool. So when you get out to the beach and you hit Kos, you hit the Orphan of Kos, right? You see the
Mhm.
corpse of Kos and you
Mhm.
watch the orphan crawl out, which again, I don't take this literally because we know these like we already know what happened in the past. I take this as almost like maybe it's almost like an expression of the orphan's pain. This idea that like its mother was killed and it was sort of like ripped from the womb and used as like research
Mhm.
material, you know, that it's like maybe this is some kind of spiritual like representation of that moment or that pain, and the screeching adds to that. And like I've heard people talk about how the orphan fights a little bit like Gehrman, and it's like, well, that's probably not coincidental that their AI is a little alike because Gehrman helped kill Kos and like
Right.
probably handled the orphan. So I think there's a lot of interesting tie-ins there, and the fight is like it's haunting, it's creepy, it's unsettling, it's challenging, it's the clear precursor to Gale, right? We don't get Gale without Orphan of Kos. Yeah, talk to me about this fight for you.
Again, I mentioned it way at the beginning. I was expecting, and I did have, I had that moment of banging my head against the wall with Orphan of Kos for quite a while. The first phase of the fight feels really scary when you're first starting to deal with it, but then you start to learn the patterns that kind of Kos projects throughout the fight with this first phase, and it becomes so much fun. That first phase in particular is just it's again with the dance analogy, it's the perfect Bloodborne dance in fighting the first phase of Orphan of Kos. Just learning all of his different, I don't know, lunges, his jumps. If you back away, he'll throw stuff at you. He'll summon up that big kind of spectral area attack. He's got the reach where he like can literally send that thing out on like this at the end of like a chain, which who knows what that's actually made out of. But yeah, it's a super fun. The first phase is just so much fun to learn. Second phase, on the other hand, is chaos incarnate.
Yeah.
um, Probably fun to learn. I feel like I got lucky a little bit. I almost wish I had spent more time with the second phase because once I got the first phase down, I was able to, like I said, just a few tries. If you close the distance and you kind of keep the pressure on with phase two, you can make it out alive. You can kind of hang in there. So I wish I had spent a little bit more time with phase two just to learn all the attack patterns. But that big lightning attack coming out from Kos, when he starts to send out those like big projectile attacks raining down from the sky, it's just wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like a much dirtier, sloppier, scarier version of the Gale fight, you know, where
Yeah.
Gale is so cursed and so far gone, but there's still like that sort of grace and dignity to the fight. Whereas Kos is just, it's so violent, it's so
Mhm.
intense. I know I told you like one of my longtime strategies, and I've even done this on like committed speed runs. Not always, like I've definitely just defeated the orphan on the beach, but I will often just lure him a ways out into the water because the arena is so big, the water's shallow, and I think it's just a mental thing. Even if it cost me some time, it was like I could just get into a calmer space if I had a little more breathing room with that boss.
Mhm.
So I think that's one way in which From was generous is you do have almost like an infinite boss arena. But yeah, it's intense, high intimidation factor. It's a perfect sort of final fight, you know, even though you're going to do the whole Gehrman thing after Kos, like it is essentially the final boss that they delivered for Bloodborne. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's awesome. Like it's such a good fight.
Yeah, it absolutely lives up to the hype.
Well, and
Uh,
it keeps Leland with the like the weird, like how they're always weird and they always subvert your expectations. Where like at the end of Dark Souls 3, when you at first when it's like, wait, this is the guy I'm fighting, this Gale guy. What is this? Like it's like these
mhm.
two nobodies fighting at the end of the world, you know,
Yeah.
where you'd almost expect the final boss to be like Nameless King or something. And it's like, no, it's this dude. And then it's the
It's
same
this
with like
guy.
Bloodborne, right? It's like this unborn placenta wielding abomination, you know. And it's like no, the final boss isn't like Gascoigne or something, it's this.
It's
So
this.
yeah, it's a classic From move, but I'm glad. I mean, of course it challenged you, it challenges everybody, but
Mhm.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it definitely lived up to the hype. It was every bit as intimidating as I expected and that I wanted it to be. I wanted to go into that fight and just get decimated. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah, that's
wanted
part
to
of
have
it.
that experience and yeah, it's all about that, confronting those fears, overcoming them in order to feel just like fully triumphant when you can finally beat a boss like that.
Totally.
Um, it was like
You
such
earn
a
it.
high note. Yeah, you
Yep,
earn your victories there with Kos. There's no, I mean, I'm sure there are like cheese methods out there, but like there's no, you have to earn the W no matter
yeah.
no
Well,
matter how
and when
you
he kills
approach
you,
that
it,
fight.
it it never really feels cheap, you know. It always feels pretty fair. It's like, God damn, he got me. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Hmm.
yeah, it's fair. It's very well designed. Like it's just From doing what From does best. As we round the corner here
Hmm.
on this epic Bloodborne journey, give some Chalice bosses a shout out because I again like the Chalices could be their own discussion, their own podcast, but it is so cool, and that's why I always encourage people to at least explore into the Chalices a bit because there's totally unique bosses down there you don't find anywhere else, like the Thumerian Elder and Descendant, Watchdog of the Old Lords, Bloodletting Beast. I know you said you didn't have a chance to do the Queen, but right, Yharnam is down there. What did you get to experience with the Chalices?
I'm glad you asked, Tara, because I have created a Chalice Dungeon bosses one word speedrun section
Oh,
where for each boss that I've faced, and I did, like you said, I missed a couple because I got kicked into New Game Plus, and I was like, I'm not gonna try to mess around and find all these Chalice ingredients. So
the
I still have a
chalices don't
couple.
scale, by the way, with New Game Plus,
Mhm.
which I feel like is one of those,
Oh, interesting.
Bloodborne being a little rushed. It's like one of those oversights, but it does mean the chalices become a little trivial if you go too deep. So I would suggest if you keep going on New Game Plus one, maybe
Hmm.
try to knock out anything you still want to that you didn't get to, because it'll still feel, fair. It'll still feel fun.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know,
But yeah,
actually, because
give
that's
me your one word chalice speedrun thing here. This sounds good.
all right. So we're gonna start with the undead giant. I simply have eh. Then we move into the merciless watcher, to which I have LOL, which I guess is technically three words, but just
Well, I mean, technically it's merciless watcher, but it should be watchers
oh, true. And there are three of them,
because there's
so
three.
that's three words, one for each boss.
Yeah, right.
That's fair. Um, we go into Watchdog of the Old Lords, to which I simply have to say. From there, we go into the beast possessed soul, cat, keeper of the Old Lords, Carla, Umarian descendant, sinner, highly
Mm-hmm.
reminiscent of Lost Sinner in my
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Mm-hmm. I'm picking
Uh,
up what you're putting down.
Man eater boar, pig, bloodletting beast, giant, and finally, abhorrent beast, Carl's Jr. So that kind of wraps it all up pretty concisely, I would say. My thoughts on the Chalice Dungeon bosses that I fought.
I also have to
So,
ask you, with
mhm.
the boars, did you have the opportunity to put your hand into the backside of a boar in this game with a visceral? Did you
Yeah,
have a chance to give a boar a rectal exam? Is
I
essentially
loved
what
it.
I'm asking. Okay, good.
It was great.
Good. There should be a trophy for that.
Yeah, there's like a trilogy of boar interactions like that in the Nightmare of Mensis. There's three of
Mm,
them that it's kind of like in the area leading up to the wet nurse fight.
yep.
So yeah,
Did you
had a
actually
good time.
notice those boars have extra eyes too, which is pretty
Oh
cool?
really?
Yeah, they're a little different. It's a
Oh,
cool
that's
little,
trippy.
yeah, it's a cool little touch. But yeah, I really wish there was a trophy for that. It would, like maybe the trophy title could be like clean bill of health or something, and it's like visceral a boar from behind. I don't know. It's just an idea.
Yeah. So okay. So for Emperor and Beast, Carl's Jr. I had to go for the Carl's Jr. pun. But yeah, I mean it's literally just Parl but in miniature form. It's a lightning, little lightning beast, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah, and you want to know a fun fact about the suspicious beggar?
Mm.
The suspicious beggar is actually an abhorrent beast.
Oh really?
That is actually the true form of the suspicious beggar. Yeah, pretty cool. There's a lot of fun tie-ins with the chalices
Mhm.
like that. So it's
That's
yeah,
cool.
it's easy, like we've talked about, and this is nothing new. It's been discussed to death. The chalices were rushed. Miyazaki said it himself. He said he wishes, like the chalices and the blood gems, and there's a few elements of the game he wishes he could have gone back and the team could have spent more time on. But even as they are, it adds so much depth and replayability, to Bloodborne. And you could just imagine like what chalices would add to like Dark Souls 3 or Sekiro or something. And all the mini dungeons in Elden Ring, they kind of emulate chalices to a degree, but I think they add so much more than they, like hurt the game or anything like that. Like I think
Mhm.
they're way more of a plus than a negative, at least from where I stand. I enjoy them.
Yeah, for what they're worth, I had fun kind of, navigating through them for the few that I did. I could kind of see myself maybe growing tired of the repetitive patterns found within the
Sure.
dungeons themselves, but it is a cool idea to, if you're going to have like a reskinned boss or whatever, to put them down in this kind of like conceptually having these like randomized generated dungeons is it's interesting. And then
Mhm.
to have some of these like exclusive bosses and kind of buffed bosses that you've already faced is, I don't know, it's cool. It's a cool idea.
Yeah, lots of NPCs down there. I think the whole way about how you like initiate the chalices and get into them and you can share chalice codes and stuff, like it's a pretty cool idea. Not fully realized, but
Mm.
yeah, I give them props for trying. Like it was a pretty ambitious idea. I got a couple super duper quick rapid fires for you, and I feel like we've probably covered most of these, but
Let's do it.
these are like mostly one word answers too. Favorite weapon.
Well, I got to go with the cleaver just because
Yeah.
it was old reliable for the whole journey. Though I will say the holy blade was a good time for, if I needed to clear out an area, just transition it into the dual-handed sword and just go to town. It was a good time.
Favorite level.
I feel like I still got to go with Central Yharnam.
Central Yharnam. It's a
It's
good
just
pick.
it's just so good. It's just right out the gates, one of the best levels in the whole game.
Yeah. If you look at the map top down, like online, it honestly looks like a classic Doom map or something. It looks like a maze. Like it's incredible level design. Favorite NPC?
um, that's pretty tricky. I'd probably have to say either Eileen or Alfred, just because he has such an
Ooh,
interesting storyline and he's kind of there throughout the majority of your playthrough. He kind of pops in and out.
I dig it. That's cool. Favorite boss?
You already know. It's my boy Ligarius, and it's not even a competition. It's not even close, if we're
I
being
love
very
that.
honest. It's not even close. It's
I love
Ligarius.
that. Yeah. No, that's a respectable pick. I don't think anybody would push back on that. Um, Favorite piece of music you can recall from the game?
Hmm. Um, it's interesting. I usually like to really key in on the soundtracks of from soft games, and this is one that I'm definitely gonna have to revisit. And also, that it also comes with time and
Oh,
engaging with
totally.
these bosses over and over to really learn their pieces. Um,
But I bet something stuck with you that you heard.
um, it's it's hard. It's really hard not to say the the theme you hear when you go to Yahar'gul. It's just the most haunting
Oh,
piece, and it's the one
the ambient
that just
music if you
it,
go there early. Yeah.
yeah, it's so haunting. It just sticks with you. So I think right now that's got to be my pick.
That is a really good pick. I feel like that piece is that piece called like Hail the Nightmare or something? Like it actually has a name, I
Oh my
think. Like
gosh, that's fitting.
yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. That's all I got for you, man. It was so much fun. Like this was an epic Bloodborne discussion. I mean, obviously you could go so deep on any one weapon or level or NPC or boss, right? But I feel like this was like a really good crash course in like all things Bloodborne. Oh, I got to
Yeah.
put you on the spot. Try to
Mhm.
rank it for me.
Oh man.
Give
Um,
me like succinct closing thoughts and then try to rank it like within your personal kind of ranking for these games.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. This has been the perfect way for me to just kind of like offload a bunch of my thoughts. this last month has been kind of rapid fire, just cranking through this game. As any first playthrough of a FromSoft game is, it's a lot to process. So this has been fun. Chatting with you about FromSoft is always, a good time. It's one of my favorite things to do, and this was just such a good time. And
Back
yeah,
at you, dude.
Bloodborne is it's a special game, and I understand now why so many people connect with this game and why it's like a favorite of so many people. And I've heard from a lot of my friends and people in the community that this is a game that can really and has really like pulled people into like a profound love for FromSoft. So it's got a special place in the heart of the community, and it's undeniable why. After now that I've played it, it's apparent why this is such a special game. But if I have to rank it, and it is so hard because Dark Souls 3 is always in my heart number one. Right now, number two is probably Elden Ring. I have a feeling that's gonna change because I'm gonna take on Sekiro really soon here. Gonna play
Then
through
you're
that
gonna get
again.
that sweet, sweet Elden Ring expansion.
And then we're gonna get the Elden Ring expansion. That's gonna kick that up to number one. So yeah, right now it's kind of a dogfight for the top three for me right now. With
Ooh, okay.
Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, and Sekiro, and it's Bloodborne's maybe breaking into that top three. But right now I think it's sitting at number four for me right
I
now.
like that. That's respectable. Maybe knocking on the door of Sekiro, but
Yeah. Yep.
Sekiro hanging on to number three. I dig that. That's a good
Hmm.
list. I think I do the same. I think maybe other than, I think my list is probably just like yours, except I'd probably slot Demon Souls in where you have
Hmm.
Sekiro, and Bloodborne's probably knocking on the door of Demon Souls. But again, it's like choosing children or whatever
Yeah.
cliche you want to use. Like I recently replayed Dark Souls 1 on Switch, and it's probably my least favorite. Like if I had to rank the 7 games, I'd probably put DS1 actually last. But like that doesn't mean I don't love DS1, you
Hmm.
know? It's how the chips fall.
Well, thanks again for having me on, and I look forward to chatting with you about more from soft games in the future, man.
Yeah, we might have to do that tier list on Twitch. That'd be fun. Like, we probably will do it pretty quickly too
Yeah,
after this chat. Just slap them on the board,
right.
you know?
Let's do it. 100%.